In this lesson, we will learn to do a multicolor sketch using technical pens, inks and watercolors. For this exercise, you will need one or more technical pens, colored inks, watercolor brushes and watercolors. I am using a set of 6 Pigma Micron pens, colored inks, artist grade watercolors and artist grade watercolor pencils. You may use any brand of technical pens and colors of your choice. Watercolors and inks will be used interchangeably during this demo. You are free to use either watercolors or inks or both. The only difference is that the inks are waterproof once dry and brighter in color. So I prefer watercolors for softer washes and inks for brighter foreground elements. I also use watercolor pencils for smaller details. If you don't have watercolor pencils, you can achieve the same result by applying watercolors or inks with a fine-tipped brush. I am assuming that you already have a light pencil sketch ready on a smooth sketch paper of 100 GSM or more thickness. I am using a smooth Bristol paper of 250 GSM thickness for this sketch. Let's begin. Let's start with a light wash with a broad brush. I have started with a yellow-green wash as that's the primary background color. At the beginning, we are blocking the broader areas and don't need the finer accuracy. Keep the washes very light at this time. If the color seeps in some of the foreground elements, no worries, we can cover it later. I am using a hand tissue to blot out the wet paint. And now I am switching to a finer 0.2 brush. Here I am using the sepia ink. The brush is not saturated with ink but rather dry. The reason for using the brush dry is to apply this rough, rusty texture. For drying the brush, blot it with a tissue before putting it to the paper. Always apply darker shades over light shades. I am using sepia and brown inks interchangeably. Now I am shifting to a broad brush because I need to cover a broader area with a smooth finish. Cover the glass pane of this window. Do not paint the edge of the window. Even though this glass pane is dusty and possibly covered in scratches, it is still glass and slightly reflective. The reflections are that of the surrounding foliage, so they are of random shapes. However, remember to leave some white spaces as shown. Do not cover the entire area. Now let's shift to some warmer and brighter colors for the tuk-tuk. I am using a combination of yellow and brown to paint this tuk-tuk. The lower part of the body of the tuk-tuk is normally black, but due to rust and dust, it appears greyish. Feel free to use any colors for this. We are doing an expressive sketch here. Don't try to imitate reality. Reality is boring. Sketches should be vibrant and full of life. They should be better than reality. You must have noticed that I have kept the bottom part of the sketch blank till now. We are going to paint the overlapping foliage in this blank part in a different way. But before that, let's paint these hanging branches. Darkening the area beyond the vehicles will pop them out. Paint the glass pane of the tuk-tuk in the same way as done for the car. I have used sepia brown and a small amount of black ink for this purpose. Now I will use the watercolor pencil for some finer details. If you don't have watercolor pencils, you may use watercolors or inks with a fine brush to achieve the same result. When using a watercolor pencil, always wet the surface with water first. Use a clean brush for controlled wetting of paper. See how I am first using the brush to wet the surface, followed by watercolor pencil. Watercolor pencils produce bright colors as compared to watercolors. So they should be used to paint the elements one wants to highlight. In this case, that would be the red tail lamp. Now I am adding darker foliage over the light yellow-green wash applied earlier. Be careful while painting the foliage visible through these metal bars. The metal bars must overlap the foliage since they are in the foreground. Now I am going to use an interesting tool, an old toothbrush. This is the part that I absolutely love, going berserk with the toothbrush. One of the beautiful aspects of expressive sketching is in the happy accidents brought about by use of unconventional tools like this. I am liberally spraying dark green, sepia and bright yellow inks with the toothbrush all over the background. Some of these color droplets are bound to land in places within sketch they were not meant to. But who cares? As I said earlier, we are not mimicking reality, but we are making reality even more beautiful. After blotting out the excess paint and water, I am applying some color with brushes. This application of colors is just to bridge the area between absolute chaos in the background and some sanity still left in the foreground. It's a good idea to use bright colors on top of the dark color. Switching now to blue watercolor pencil. This will provide some much needed contrast from the yellow-green colors we have been heavily using so far. Now I will shift to using Pigma Micron pens for adding finer details. Use the pens to sharpen the edges of the vehicles. You may also add a hint of grass blades and some random shapes in the foreground. You may experiment with pens in any way you want. There's no need to follow exactly what I'm doing. Whatever I'm showing you is one way of doing things. This is not the only way, and certainly this is not the only best way. In fact, there's no wrong way of doing things in art. As I always stress, there are only two rules in art. Rule number 1 is that there are no rules. And rule number 2 is that in case of any doubt, refer to rule number 1. Now we'll do some finishing work with pens. It's totally up to you when to call it finished. After doing some finishing, this is the final result. In the next lesson, you will learn to draw limited color sketch using technical pens, inks, and watercolors.